kind of like that might be like, if we get past, you can't water outside, what do we do next? I don't know. Our group is a relatively recently formed nonprofit. We're so new that we're not even a 501c3 yet. And we started with this thought. We wanted to have forums like this of interest, of topics of interest to the community, and try to bring our community together kind of metaphorically around the table. Talk about issues of common concern, no matter which side of the politics of anything you're on. We want to educate ourselves about issues like public education and water, and roads, and what the solutions are we may disagree about, but we think there's some issues that we at least all see in common.
Andrew,
Yes. I'll talk. How about that? So we want to try to do this in the Wimberley way and try to be civil and friendly to each other and have a robust discussion. If you were around the legislature this morning, sometimes it gets a little less than civil. I want to acknowledge and thank the Hays County League of Women Voters for co-sponsoring our events. Linda Calvert, president of that group, is here tonight. Many of you know the league is a mainstay in civic education and helping us all keep up with elections and big political issues in our place and time. We want to foster a thriving and united Wimberley Valley by engaging our community to address concerns like I just described. We began with a forum on public education, what was happening in the legislature. Tonight, we have 5 speakers with us to talk about their perspectives on water, how we got here, where we're going. We hope that discussing these issues will bring us together, might even provide some solutions. A couple of business administrative points before I turn this over to Duane to moderate this panel and introduce our speakers. Please turn off your cell phone ringers. I turned mine off a second ago. We have a survey on this pad here for you to jot a note down on your way out and tell us what you'd like us to talk about next. We can sit around the table and come up with all kinds of great ideas, but I think, we'd like to have crowds like this because it's topics that you want to know about, not what we're kind of guessing you want to know about. Some of you last couple of times have asked what you might do to support us. Again, we're not a 501c3 yet, and we may not be. I don't know. It's a lot of work. But if you want to support us, throw a couple $5 in the jar. We're going to make a donation to the church for so generously letting us meet in this wonderful facility, and we really do appreciate that. June 18th will be our next forum. It will be another one on water. I purchased the rights to an extremely great, I think, documentary called Written on Water. It's mostly about the audible aquifer, but it pertains very much to where we are here in the valley. And whether we're going to do that at 7A Ranch with Scott Way or somewhere else, I don't know yet, but the date I do know, June 18th, about this same time in the evening, that'll be the documentary. Please stick around after. There may be some cookies left. Talk with your neighbors, talk with your friends. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Duane Redis to get this party started. Thank you, Duane.
Thank you all for spending time to be with us tonight. Water is life, and it is important we understand what our situation is. And we have some experts up here who are going to help us understand different points of view. Thank you, Commissioner Walt Smith. If you'll just wave at the audience as I give your names. And Commissioner Hammer, would you just wave your hand? Yes, there. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Walt Smith is Precinct 4 representative on the Commissioner Court. We have Linda Kaye Rogers, who is Hays-Trinity Groundwater Conservation District Vice President. She's very thankful. She instigated the whole Jacobs Well Management Zone years ago and is active with rules and advocates for water districts. Marshall Jennings, former Assistant Director of the Edwards Aquifer Research Data Center, a hydrologist, retired as a Texas State faculty member. Chris Elliott is here as a concerned Rolling Oaks well owner, and I think he has some really interesting points of view. And Dan Pickens is here. He's the Barton, previously on the board for the Barton Springs Aquifer, Edwards Aquifer Conservation District. So if y'all just welcome these people. And one statement that I just wanted, it helped me understand 25 years ago when I moved here, on the front page of the Wimberley View was a big article about water. And here we are 25 years later, we're still having to think about water. We're under what's called a rule of capture law by the state. There had been a conservation amendment to it, but that's where we start from and what we answer to in many different ways. So that may come up as a context you might need to know. So I wanted to start with, why don't we start with Dan Pickens? He has some history and another context to set before we get into more about the science. So I'll hand it over to Dan. Oh. Each person's gonna have about 10 minutes. And at the 2-minute warning, Andrew's gonna ring a little bell or give you a 2-minute warning sign. So kind of wrap it up at that point.
You're good, you're hot.
Okay. All right, I don't think I will be going the full 10 minutes, but swallow. So I served a 4-year term on the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District as Precinct 1, which was the area that included the Rolling Oaks neighborhood, kind of the west side of everything between the municipalities to call it 150 going north to the Travis County line. And wrapping south all the way down around the southern tip of San Marcos. So the western portion of the BSEACD, say that fast, district. We were incorporated into the district, our area, if you recall, back in 2015, when EP came, electropurification came to put in some commercial wells to try to put water to serve Anthem and some of the other neighborhoods in Beater Wall, east of Utah. So that was a historic event full of angst for the neighborhood. We had the assistance of the district in determining the impact those wells would have. Those wells were drilled. We did pumping tests. We saw the drawdown, and eventually, not to cover the whole thing, but EP went away, largely because the gas pipeline came in and did to them what they were going to do to everybody else. So EP went away, but our water concerns stay. And one of the things that we're dealing with at the district prior to annexing this, what they call the shared jurisdiction, is there were very few private well owners in the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District. They were mainly regulating the water suppliers, who largely have their wells in the middle Trinity, a few in the lower Trinity. But all of our wells as landowners in the area are in the upper Trinity, which basically they say, tough luck. We hardly regulate that. And we don't base any consumption values out of it. So the middle Trinity is where BSEACD's interest lies, largely. So as a representative of that district, I did my best to represent the landowners and our concerns and try to get the district to recognize the responsibility that they have for all well owners and all the people who are drawing water out of the ground. I wanted to start by saying stage 5 is around the corner.
What is stage 5?
So stage 5 is what they call emergency measures at the BSEACD. With each stage of drought, they ask the water providers to curtail their pumping by a percentage. So 20%, 30%, 40%. At stage 5, they can ask for 50% reduction in pumping. The problem is they have very few legal means to enforce that when somebody overpumps. To give a broad history on the lack of tools in the chest for water conservation districts. But I wanted to kind of start by saying the need is urgent. The drought of record is the drought of the 50s. That's often referenced as the point at which we want to assume under the worst conditions equal to those of the drought of 57, that we still have water in the aquifer. This is the desired future condition that we manage the aquifers to. So in the drought of 57, we're not there yet. We're in a bad drought. But the situation has changed. In the drought in 57, the Hays County population was 24,000. Based on the EPA's estimate of annual usage per person of roughly 30,000 gallons, with the water usage in 1957 was about 720 million gallons in that year. So in 2020, according to the Census Bureau, our population was 241,000, and we're using 7 billion gallons of water. 2023, population is 280,000. 2024, our population is 292,000. So at this point, we're drawing 9 billion gallons a year out of the aquifer, under the assumption that all that water is coming from the aquifer. Obviously, we have surface water feeding some of our water needs. We also have pipelines from other aquifers coming across the country, stealing from one watershed to feed another. None of that is particularly sustainable. It follows the kind of general human pattern of exploitation, uses natural resources till they're gone and then move on. And the problem is there's no place to move. So herein lies the theory of sustainability. You can only use what you can use, and you should try to do your best to manage that as efficiently as possible and reuse as much as possible. So when one thinks about water usage, the average person uses about 18.5 gallons a day flushing the toilet. That amounts to about 22% of the water usage per day. Washing machines, 15 gallons per person per day. Shower, 11.5 gallons per person per day. Dishwasher, 1 gallon per person per day. All of which to say is keep that in the back of your mind when you start thinking about solutions. Because we can't keep flushing our waste with potable water we draw out of the ground. We're going to have to do something different. The other thing I wanted to kind of touch on was rainfall deficits. Since 2015, we have a general trend downward. Of course, 2015 was the year of the big flood. It looks great on this graph that I developed. It's way up there. But since then, it's kind of edging down and to the right. Our average rainfall, according to the Texas Almanac for Hays County, is 33.75 inches per year. So out of the last 5 years, we've had 1 year of above average rainfall, and the rest have been as many as 20 inches short of that. So you're looking at successive years, cumulative deficits that are adding up. The next thing I wanted to kind of touch on was
Sing to your microphone.
the growing temperature of the earth. So they have calculated the rise in temperatures based on a baseline of the 1900s, and we are now we've had 10 consecutively hottest years on record in the last 10 years. So population growth, water usage, temperature, creating more evaporation, less rainfall, things are coming to a head, as you might suspect. So the situation is dire. We're using 9 times more than what we did in the drought of record. And our population is projected more than double in the next 25 years. Groundwater conservation districts are kind of intentionally weak by their empowering legislation when they were set up. We don't have a lot of tools to rein in bad actors, those who overpump month after month throughout drought conditions. My position is we must all work together to tackle this problem, and it's going to mean doing some out of the box thinking, like giving water districts the ability to withdraw pumping permits from bad actors, giving districts the ability to decline well drilling and pumping permits. Water is a finite resource. We have to acknowledge that the rule of capture is inadequate. Water suppliers must provide smart meters for every customer. Part of the problem is when you say you have to reduce your usage by 20%, what does that mean? How much do I normally use? When am I crossing the threshold of overuse? If we all had smart meters, the water provider could say, you are approaching your monthly limit and you're only 2 weeks in. To help their customers conserve. It may come to customers being charged for their overusage. We're finding the water suppliers when they overpump, but it's not changing their behavior. Other ideas like new septic systems to be closed, systems that treat and recycle water, and I will leave it there.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. On to Marshall Jennings, because he has a lot of information, understanding about research for many, many years.
Okay, I'll try to speak into this thing. Well, maybe. I assume everybody here is concerned about groundwater, our major water supply. Dan mentioned floods and droughts, the 2015 flood, and by the way, I'm 87 years old. I say that in case you're not nice to me, I can claim elder abuse. Anyway, so I've been around a while, grew up in San Antonio during the drought of the 50s. In 1991, I'm retired from U.S. Geological Survey. We did a national water summary on floods and droughts, state by state. And I was a bit shocked when we did the 8-pager on Texas, again, to the late 80s. Since then, we've had the drought in 2011-12, and we're currently in obviously a multi-year drought. The big droughts of history in Texas, 1932 to 34, aerial drought, 35 to 40 aerial drought, 47 to 48 an aerial drought. Then we had a statewide drought, 50 to 57 and 60 to 67. And then we were adding on the current drought in 2011-12. And by the way, 2011 and 12, I lost 20 trees off of my 7 acres, and the state lost 7% of their trees. So it was a pretty dramatic. I'm not sure that it doesn't equal the 50s drought, but nevertheless, in the 50s, Comel Springs went dry for 11 months. San Marcos did not. So that's the nature of floods and droughts, and typically in Texas, droughts are ended by massive flooding. That's what happened in 1957, a statewide flood. My parents, my mother was 19 years old, 1935, and they went with a church group out to the Frio River for a picnic. Well, there was a big flood. At following a period of 3 years of drought on the West Nueces, been dry for 36 months, and in a few hours, it went to 580,000 cubic feet a second at the low flow of the Mississippi River, and then back down again. So that's the nature of floods and droughts in the state. I did work at the university on the Edwards Aquifer issues. Did some research there on the Trinity Aquifer in central Texas, the 9 counties as well. So, you know, when you compare the Edwards Aquifer, and maybe that's a typical person that has interest to develop, they just assume that, goodness, we're just part of the Edwards Aquifer. Well, no, we're not. The Edwards Aquifer is far more productive. If we accept a porosity value of 6%, there's somewhere between 25 million acre feet and 45 million acre feet. And Linda, what do we have? 9,000 acre feet to distribute here, according to our MAG per year. So we're tiny compared to the Edwards Aquifer. Also, the Texas Water Development Board in the 90s, mid-90s, I think, declared our portion of the Trinity Aquifer a priority groundwater management area, which meant that it will not provide adequate water supply for its citizens going forward. And we're experiencing that right now. By the way, I have a well on my 7 acres. And it's one of the oldest, longest term records in the Hays-Trinity Groundwater District, which I strongly support this district, and I hope you do too. But my well, and except for 2 periods of 3 and 4 years where they trended up for the 19 years of the 26 years of record I have, it's been in a downward trend, averaging about 9 feet lost in water level per year. Overall, the 26 years that the district has used my well as a monitoring well, it's lost 80 feet, or an average of about 3 feet per year. And that's fairly typical. The Henley well, which is another long well, has lost 4 feet per year over its record of monitoring. My friend David Glenn, who lives in Wimberley up on a bluff above the river, his has been pretty low. So there are places where water levels have been maintained, but in general, we're going down. We're going down. And so, you know, there's a concept that's been largely ignored in maybe Texas in general, the idea of groundwater sustainability. And we're just ignoring that. Here's the definition, part of the National Groundwater Association. Groundwater sustainability is defined as the development and use of groundwater resources to meet current and future beneficial uses without causing unacceptable environmental or social economic consequences. And so, you know, it implies a limit to use. Development has a red line to it, where we want to sustain the aquifer. At present, I think Linda has facts on her mind. We're far from that. We're the records of water level monitoring show almost constant downward trend. Again, 19 years of downward trend in my well. So these are realities, and we're stuck in Texas with an English common law called the rule of capture. In 1904, that was what drove groundwater law, and still is. It was only modified over the years by the legislature to allow sustainability and no harm to your, deliberate harm to neighbor's well, but basically it says that, if you got a bigger pump than your neighbor, you can have all the water you want, irregardless of harm that you might unintentionally do to him. But there are other groundwater laws. So Texas is one that has this English common law that goes back to 1843. And by the way, the English don't use it anymore. And neither does California, Arkansas, and nearby states. 2 minutes. So we know that the state prefers that groundwater conservation management be done through groundwater conservation districts. But purposely, I think the Hays-Trinity district wound up with an enabling law that made it probably the weakest groundwater conservation district among the 99 in the state. I was appointed to that board by my commissioner, good friend of mine, Russ Molinar, with 4 other gentlemen. And 2 of the people probably had word that it was going to be a temporary district. They wanted to get the LCRA out of the Lakes water along 290 where wells were going dry in 1999. And then they would disband the district. But 3 of us, myself, Jack Holland, and Eddie Gumber, were environmentally oriented. And so we went out and set up a monitoring network of 40 wells. It's now 62 wells, and began to collect data. So when we came to the vote, the people said, we want to keep the groundwater district. And I hope that that's the general attitude today. How many? 1 more minute? Okay. I look forward to talking to you individually. If you want to ask me any questions, I know all the groundwater science stuff that we could talk about, but would bore you. But I'm so happy to be here on this platform with Commissioner Walt Smith, who's, along with Margaret Hammer, have really gone to bat for the citizens of Western Hays County. And so a real tribute to them. Unfortunately, our state senator and state representative have alternative views. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's hear from you from the Hays-Trinity Ground District.
Good evening. I am so excited to see all of these people here. I'm going to say just a few words. The legislature created groundwater districts to manage groundwater. They had the foresight to see that this was going to be an issue and that water was finite. We have been known, I'm in the Hays-Trinity Groundwater Conservation District. It covers the western half of Hays County. And actually, the aquifer is a little bit different on the western side of Hays County than it is on the eastern side. They still have an overlay of the Edwards aquifer on that side, which we do not have. So they still have quite a few wells that come from the Edwards aquifer and then the Trinity aquifer secondary. So anyway, the legislature has mandated groundwater districts to preserve, protect, and prevent waste of groundwater. Well, how do we do that? Well, we do it with permitting. Okay. What happens when people don't obey their permits? We're also mandated to do curtailments. We don't have a 50% curtailment at the Hays-Trinity. We have up to a 40, which is where we are right now, and that is emergency. And even that is not working. So we have to get pretty creative in how we can manage the bad players. Because as the old saying goes, there's only one bad apple in the barrel that ruins the whole thing. I am so proud of the individual well owners and most people who really do try to preserve our groundwater. I moved here almost exactly 25 years ago, and I heard before I got here there were water problems. I'm on rainwater collection, and that has worked real fine, but my trees get thirsty and they don't get to get watered. So we talked about all the contributions to the decimation of the aquifer. So what we see is that we started up here maybe with where the aquifer level was, and we have a drought and it drops way down to here, and then we get some average rain and everything, but it only comes up to here. It never comes back up to here, and that is what happens every time we go into a drought or even just one bad year. It goes down, but it only comes up part of the way. Down, part of the way. So we have a definite decline. Growth is really dehydrating the aquifer. Most people, I think, are pretty good about their use and following the curtailments. It's the bigger pumpers that are the problem, and like to think that the rules don't apply to them and that they should have the right to do whatever they want to do. Well, think about that. If you have just 2 or 3 people who think they can pump all they want, regardless of how it affects anybody else, then there's a lot of harm, and the aquifer is not going to be protected for long-term use. And I'm a big personal property rights person, but that's not going to mean anything if I don't have any water. My property value is going to be 0 if I don't have any water. So we've got all this development coming in, and our counties have no ability to manage growth or move towards sustainable development. And it seems like it's the big money people that constantly get heard and get their way with us. And they're not the ones oftentimes who live here and deal with the consequences. So we, the people, have to speak up, and we have to do what we can do, each of us as individuals. Where we are right now is that the Texas Water Development Board created what they call the modeled available groundwater. And for our district, it's 9,100 acre feet. An acre foot is a football field, 1 foot deep of water. So 9,100 of those. Right now, we have about 78 permits, and we're pumping about 67% of that, and that includes our private well owners. So what's going to, and we're in curtailment. So what's going to happen when all the pumpers, or we give all of our permits out and they're all pumping full, and we don't think we've got that 9,100 acre feet to begin with. So the Water Development Board is trying to create new mags, but it's going to be another year or 2 before those are available. In the meantime, we are ending our 5-year review of our desired future condition. And that desired future condition is a 50-year plan that is reviewed every 5 years and projected out another 50 years. And it's supposed to be for sustainability. I don't know how we're going to do that. Our creeks are going dry, our springs are going dry. Jacob's well hasn't flowed in 3 years now. That is not just the environment, but that is the economy of this whole area. Without it, Wimberley is not going to make it, and I hate to say that, but it's the sad truth. And Blue Hole is suffering, Cypress Creek, the Blanco River. A lot of that water comes down from Blanco area, and a lot of our recharge is from Blanco, kind of north and west of us, and it comes down like this, and then it goes down all different directions. But the Blanco River is also fed by a spring called the Pleasant Valley Spring, and it is maintaining quite well. It is doing very good, but as you can see, it is not putting enough water into the river to sustain it. I drive down the 7A Ranch, that bridge there at 7A Ranch, at least 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm just appalled at what the river is looking like. And Cypress Creek goes down, and then the bad stuff gets bad and worse in it. So it's a whole big ball of wax. The puzzle has got a lot of pieces, and it's a complicated puzzle. So we have to work together. We have to look at the whole picture. We have to look at population growth, use, management of that use, which is permitting, and conservation. And because the weather is not something we can depend on. And I don't want to be political, and I'm not political about water because it doesn't know and it doesn't care. And it doesn't know those boundaries that are out there either. So what we do has an impact on eastern Hays County and part of Travis County and Comal County. What they do in Blanco, even in Fredericksburg, has an impact on what happens here. It's the knee bone connected to the hip bone connected to. It's all one big activist, underground stream, if you will. It doesn't just sit there like a lake. So we have to look at this whole groundwater districts have to work with the ability that we have. The Hays-Trinity has always been, had kind of like an empty gun with no bullets. We have very limited ability to meet the mandates that are given to us. We also have difficulty with funding. Out of the 99 districts in the state, we are the only state that is funded by development and growth. Literally, our funding comes from how many new houses and buildings go in that get a new spigot. No, that's called, it's connection fees. That's exactly how we're funded, and it's only how we are funded. Our permit renewals are $300 a year, nothing. Okay, so all other groundwater districts in the state are funded by taxation and or production fees. We have ruled out taxation. We don't want taxation. We want production fees. Well, that means that all the water providers are going to have to pay for whatever they come. They're getting all this water free right now. And some of that would be passed on to you, but it would be about a maximum of maybe $8 a month. Now, frankly, I think that's worth it to be sure that I can have a shower every day and a cup of coffee every morning. Just one. Just one. So, so these are the things that we have to look at. And like I say, I don't want to be political, but I think it's very important to let all of the people who supposedly represent us look at the role that they play in the preservation of our future. We have families that have been here for generations and generations, and they're going to be here for generations. Their children, their grandchildren, grandchildren. I don't have any, but I have friends and family, and I love what God has created here. I want to see it preserved. And if we don't all come together and work in a positive direction and do what we need to do, whatever that might be, with consideration of others, we're going to be without water, groundwater in 10 years. That's the bottom line. So let's come together. Like I said, this is what makes this opportunity so exciting to see all of you here. You can call me anytime. It's haysgroundwater.org. You go to our website. We have everything on our website, all the science. We're happy to answer any phone calls. We have staff that will be happy to talk with you. We come out and look at private wells. And oh, by the way, we have about 8,000 possible private wells, and hundreds of those have gone dry. We've not gotten notification on all of them. It's not all of them are in use and should be capped, because if they're not capped or plugged, they could be polluting the aquifer. But those wells are considered when we look at how much is being pumped. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. I look forward to talking with you.
Before we hear from Commissioner Smith, I'd like to introduce Chris Elliott as a concerned well owner and get your perspective.
Can you hear me? Good. I'm a landowner. I came here in 2014. I'm really a businessman. It was by default that I came here. One of my hesitations to come here is I love the valley, but I knew about the rule of capture. My job for my whole career, I was a CRT, a chief rock turner. You hired me when you had a problem. I built businesses based on problems, solving problems. And when I look at this, the problem starts with the rule of capture, where landowners got their water taken away from them. The fix is to give that water back. Not physically back to them, but account that the landowners, if you look at this land around us, it's mostly landowners. How many people in here are landowners? That's it. You don't have any power. You have fear that you're going to run out of water, and you shouldn't live like that. There is a solution. The groundwater districts are here to help us, but they have bad math. If you look at their model, The state set it up for them to fail. They can't make their books balance. They have to keep giving out water from deposits they don't have. If landowners stood up together and said, we want a bigger voice in the math that the groundwater districts are using, we'd have a chance to keep this valley the way it is. If we don't stand up, this valley will go as everyone's telling you. Are there examples of groundwater districts that are doing this correctly? Yes. This is not pie in the sky. This is a business opportunity. These groundwater districts have figured out a way to give the power back to the landowners by allocating them a fair share of the water that they collect on their land, even though they're not using it all. They get credit for it. It's a complex problem, but it's guaranteed it can be fixed if we come together as landowners first. We go to the districts and ask the districts to work with us as landowners to allocate in their math, in their future desired conditions, a bigger portion for the water that we're catching as landowners. Now, that's not the only solution. Rainwater is a big part of that. This town has the ability to convert itself into a rainwater heaven. There's enough rain that falls here in this city that it convert itself. The parking lots out here, every building you see should have some type of rainwater catchment going forward. It doesn't happen. But even if you fix the rainwater, as long as you have available groundwater, because the math is wonky, people will come in here and try to take it. They're not going to stop. When they did the rule of capture, they made everybody a 3-year-old. I get mine at the expense of yours. We stopped sharing at the rule of capture. You can't fix the rule of capture easily, but you can go to the groundwater districts because they have the rights to change their rules, their accounting. They are given that power. Now, will they do it? It's not going to be easy. For Barton Springs, it's going to be much, much tougher because they have different stratas, different kinds of aquifer. For Hays-Trinity, they could pull it off, and they should pull it off. If they don't pull it off, they're overdrawn. It's a business model that is bankrupt. That's how I look at it. Maybe I'm wrong. Somebody correct me. That way I can go on getting retired. But it's the truth. These are business decisions. And landowners should stand up. There's thousands and thousands of landowners who think they're immune to this. Somehow it's going to work. It's not working. This county is the bellwether county for how the legislators in the state look at expansion. There are people in this room that know that. You call anybody up and you ask any of your representatives, Hays County is probably the way that most of the rest of the counties in this Texas are going to go. We're surrounded by freeways on every single side. This is a desirable place to live. But it's not going to be here the way we see it, the way we want it for our kids. And my grandsons are here. I love looking out at this country, and I love to see what it could dream itself to be. But the landowners are the key. I've set up a website called My Texas Well with the help of a lot of people. It's raw, it's not finished. But in there, we're going to help take and unravel this spaghetti pile for landowners. So they can stand up and say, you know what? I know that you're calculating as a district that I can take 200 to 300 gallons or 500 gallons a day. But my land is catching thousands of gallons when it rains. My land has a lot of water underneath it that's passing through it. I should have a fair share of being accounted for that much. Not that I'm going to use it, not that I should use it all, but that I should be accounted for it. That accounting does not exist. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Just by way of background, I don't know if everyone here knows this, but After redistricting, I lost over 2/3 of my precinct, but I, at one point, had all the way from, I had all the way from Blanco County, the whole Henley area, all the way down, on 165, all the way to the Travis County line, all of the 290 corridor. And so I had a huge part of, the Groundwater District, or the Hays-Trinity, that, was pretty much all of it that's outside of the Wimberley Valley. What I would tell you is that from the time I moved here, back in 2012, I started hearing reports and stories from my neighbors directly, about the wells going dry. When I got elected in 2019, or started serving in 2019, the bellwether for me and my precinct was the Henley area, because those wells in Henley started going dry, in a wholesale fashion. Since I've been in office, I've had multiple water systems in my, small community water systems in my precinct, that have ceased to function. And it's because their infrastructure, they have infrastructure problems, number one, but number two, there's just no water under them. I think one of the things that is lost when we have this conversation as well is that when we talk about the Hays-Trinity, it's a very different aquifer. People imagine a lake underground. That's what the audible is, right? We have a river. And I think some of the speakers did a good job today in illustrating that what goes in the ground in Dripping Springs is probably passing under Wimberley in about 3 hours in some cases. Sometimes it takes weeks. Now there is some exceptions to that. But I do find it interesting that even some of our the biggest water users that we've been talking about today, they've tried to look at wet weather in aquifer storage, where they can find holes in the aquifer that can hold additional water, and then in times of heavy rain, store extra water there. The problem is that our aquifer is like Swiss cheese. It doesn't work like, it's not that bowl that Ogallala is. It's a strainer, and that water runs through it pretty freely. We've heard a lot of bad news tonight, right? I think nobody is excited about it. I loved your example about your mom, my dad. So I grew up on a ranch in Hill County and still have it. We've got ag wells there, and grew up on a well. My dad was the most important thing on that ranch, I can promise you, was our well. And the reason for that was he grew up in Big Bend, in what's now the Big Bend National Park. And they averaged about 6 or 8 inches a year. He would always laugh and say, "Man, you ought to be here the day it comes. It's a heck of a day." We get that 6 or 8 inches, but he really put a high priority for it and on it. And I carried that with me even as a kid. And whenever I worked in Congress for a number of years. When I did, I handled water conservation issues for West Texas. We're the largest district in the state of Texas. It was bigger than every state east of the Mississippi. It's a large district. I can tell you, when I left that job, I actually I did congressional affairs for the Department of Agriculture Rural Development Program. And we worked at getting water into rural areas where there just wasn't any, period. And then when I left that job, I went and I helped set up an office in Washington, D.C. for the National Rural Water Association that represents 92% of the population of the U.S. All those small systems out there. I do want to share some good news. Several of the speakers up here made a very good point relative to the fact that the county doesn't have any planning and zoning authority at all. If you look at the 5, there's actually only 5 things the county has purview over when it comes to development. But one of them is septic, and the county, I noticed former Commissioner Conley is here. The county years ago went to, if you go to build a house in Hays County, I can promise you that there's a chart that you have to use. It tells you how big a lot you have to have septic and a well together. And we use that thing very judiciously. Some of the other things that you may not be aware of is we require groundwater availability studies here in Hays County. We've had that ability under state law, and we've done that for a number of years. Under the previous legislative session, They changed the law in the state, which was a good move, to say you shall do a groundwater study or a groundwater availability study. And so Hays County has implemented that, and actually there's the availability for commissioners, for a commissioner's court on an individual basis to offer waivers for that, to not require a property owner to do that. And Commissioner Hammer and I co-sponsored a resolution of the court that's been adopted into the policy of Hays County that says we will not allow any variances, and the court won't. Here in Hays County, we won't even entertain the request for a variance. And so every subdivision will have to do the groundwater management. And I'm pretty excited about that. That was a step that most counties haven't taken. I don't know of one that's taken it yet. Some additional good news, we're in the middle of redrafting all of our rules and regulations related to development. And we are probably going to be the first county in the entire state of Texas with a full conservation development title. And, you know, since we don't have the authority at the state level to regulate a lot of the development that is going on out there, the one thing we do have is the ability to incentivize from a financial standpoint. And none of us believe on the court that we should do that by giving up tax base or by funding it with our current taxpayers. We think if a developer wants to come here, then they should pay for that conservation development title. And in order to get that conservation development title, we've incentivized with, or we're looking at incentivizing with public improvement districts on those individual developments themselves, those future residents who are going to be living there. If they, don't put in wells, if they do rainwater collection, and then we have a whole list of things that a developer can mandate within a development agreement with the county. And when they do that, it will incentivize one of the very first things is no wells in those developments. And so we can give them, maybe more density but the other part of that conservation development title is you have to leave at least 50% of the overall property open space. And so it's going to help with our aquifer as well. I would say that, with that lack of planning and zoning authority, it's a problem. And what we're finding is that, cities have the ability to pass ordinances to do things that we just don't have in the county. And with some changes in legislation a couple of years ago, now developers have the ability to exit the extraterritorial jurisdiction of a city, and they're choosing to do that wholesale because they know that we don't have those abilities. And so we're seeing a lot more of that development that otherwise would have been in the city, where you could have some of those rules that is now being passed on to the county, and the county shouldering that burden. I do know that y'all want to talk about a couple of these legislation. I'm sure that our moderator will talk that. But I'll be around, and I would highly encourage you to speak to Commissioner Hammer. She has been an absolute advocate on your behalf. And if you haven't seen it, she was on a podcast here locally this morning. I encourage you to watch it. Very well thought out and very well done. And it's been a pleasure serving with her on the court. And I can tell you, I don't represent the Wimberley Valley. You're kind of my adopted second precinct. And I say that because I don't think Commissioner Shell or Commissioner Conley or Commissioner Hammer would let me not say that. So, but if y'all, I'll stick around after this, and always have an open door policy in my office. So come by anytime, precinct 4.
Before we jump to what's on the table about the bills, do any one of you have anything to add to what the commissioner has said? Did we cover everything?
Well, lots to cover. There's lots to cover, but I think we'll get there to a lot of it this evening. The bills that he's going to be talking about are extremely important. I just would say one thing, is kind of sticking my neck out. But there's a reason for science. Science is a proven fact usually. People can fiddle with it and change it around, but when you deny science, you put your head in the sand where there is no water, by the way, and denying reality. So what groundwater districts do is work with the science. We do the science. We go out there, we do the monitoring, the measuring. We have we have hydrogeologists who do this work and they know what they're doing. And when we don't pay attention to that, we are doing nothing but asking for trouble. So that's my thing. Needs to pay attention to the science.
Okay, so Andrew,
Q&A?
well, let's talk about
Talk
what
about the
happened
bills?
within the Senate this hearing on Monday. We'll start there.
Today.
Sure, actually, it was today, the House Natural Resources. It's okay. So HB 2660 is the legislation that these folks up here are talking about, and it was introduced by Senator Perry, who's the chair of the committee over on the Senate side, and it would give what's called full Section 36 authority to our groundwater district. There's 4 groundwater districts in Hays County. The other 3 all have Section 36 authority. Only the Hays-Trinity doesn't. The initial bill, and some of my colleagues on this panel may disagree with me, but I thought it was a very good bill. I thought that there was room for improvement in it. And you know, some of the items related to how the budget processes works, and some of the items related to board member pay. No offense to all the board members who are here, but it's never been a paid position, and y'all have done a great job this far. And so whenever it passed out of the committee and the Senate side, it flew out of the committee in the same day. There were a number of individuals who testified on behalf of the bill. That was just one of many. There were a handful of individuals who testified against the bill. All of them were either paid or board members of the 2 largest violators of the groundwater district rule. I think the thing that sticks with me the most whenever we talk about this is, and Linda Kaye made a great point. She said, you got to talk about the science. And the Senate committee chair made a great point in the hearing. He said, you know, we can debate the science, but the science is what is the best that we have. And at this point, you know, your testimony, those who testified against the bill adamantly denied that they are overpumping the permits. And they say that because we're at 40% curtailment and they're pumping their full permit. They're not doing the curtailment that they would otherwise, which is expected of really all of us. I can tell you that right now, I think that, and I've had this conversation with the Groundwater District, I think they track about 40 commercial or what we would consider public water systems in the aquifer. And there's actually about, if you go to the state website and you use the GIS data on the state website, what you consider public water systems, there's about 140 that I could find. And those 140 are not the ones that you think of, right? Now, y'all think of Wimberley Water, you think of who I think is doing a very good job compared to other actors in this. There may be some dispute about that. But you look at Aqua Texas, you look at, you know, the Seminole Dripping Springs area, and at the end of the day, there's room for improvement in that entire system. And there's been, in my view, I don't want to say ignorance of the law, just a complete ignoring of those permits that they have and the restrictions that have been placed on them. And at the end of the day, you know, I have 2 meters on one of these systems myself. They view it as a cost of doing business, right? If they get fined $140,000, guess what? That comes on my water bill, and they build it into their rate. I think that the only way that we can address that is to give the groundwater district itself some teeth and some funding mechanisms. The need for this legislation, and nobody's really said it, but the need for this legislation is very clear, especially here in the Wimberley Valley area, where you've got actors like Aqua Texas who have grossly overpumped their permit. And I'm sure I'll be corrected by someone in the district, but I believe in 2022 or 2023, I can't remember which year, they overpumped it by over 100 million gallons. And so that's just astronomical to me to think about. And I think the worst part about that is that there's been no investment in infrastructure to hold them accountable on what they should or shouldn't do. The average loss in that system is over 35%. So a third of the water that they pump out of the ground never makes it through a meter. And they don't know where it goes. That's a problem. That's a problem anywhere. From a business standpoint, as a businessman and a business person, I don't know how you let 35% of your asset escape. And that's a tough sell. There are issues throughout the Aquifer in the district, and the county has been a proud partner with the district for years, and it's on installation of monitoring wells and those kind of things. Senator Campbell introduced some amendments that I think clarified the need, some of the questions that were out there relative to, she amended the bill on the Senate floor, made it very clear that there's residential exemptions in there, that there's agricultural exemptions in there. But one of the things that I don't agree with in the clarifying amendments that she inserted on the Senate floor was the elimination of the connection fee. And what I've seen, and there's one community that jumps to mind in my precinct where, the easiest thing in the world for a developer to do is to build 35 houses, call them condos, either 2,500 square foot homes, and buy one commercial meter and pay one connection fee, and then run that through the master meter. And that's a development in my precinct that has 35 homes. They all average 2,400 square foot, something like that. They pay one connection fee, and it's I don't want to say trickery, but it's business practices such as that have really they really put a crimp on the groundwater district. The bill was laid out and heard this morning from the House Natural Resources Committee. I expect that there will be a vote in that committee over the next couple of days, and we'll see it go. There will be, I'm sure, some type of committee substitute. They always make a change of some type to it. We'll see what that looks like whenever it goes to the House floor. But I would anticipate that it would pass out of the committee. I'll tell you that those same individuals who testified against the bill in the Senate side testified on the bill today, which means neutrality. They didn't testify for or against, they testified on the bill. I think that I hope there's a realization that they understand the importance of this, and that there's been a public outcry from individuals like the folks in this room that this is really important to them. But in order for that bill to pass, it has to get off the House floor. It has to go to conference. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, so we're gonna have a Q&A session. And so, because we're a little short on microphones, if you have a question, if you'll come over to this side and line up and meet you with the microphone. I would ask that you don't tell a story, that you just ask a question.
While they're doing that, I'd like to add a couple of things about the bill. Senate bill by Senator Perry 2660 just was going to give the district full chapter 36, like all the other districts have. We specifically had taxation taken out of that. We did not want everything else I put in. I've been on that board for 12 years as a volunteer. I don't think any of my board directors want to be paid. We are volunteers, and if you start paying me, it changes my whole everything about it. So the thing about private wells, if you have a private well, it's called exempt. Chapter 36 says groundwater districts cannot meter it or fiddle with you in any way whatsoever. So just taking some of that language out isn't going to make any difference, because we can't do it anyway. And that was not the intent of that language. It was to clarify chapter 36. So I think it's important to understand that private wells are just that, they're exempt wells, but you are protected by the groundwater district just like everybody else. There's no difference. We all need water. As I said, it doesn't know what color you are, where you come from, or anything else. We have to have water. It is life. So that's just something I think is important about the bill. And just one other comment, that connection fee, once we get the production fees going up, then we can probably wean off of the connection fees. But this past year, our budget is blown out of the water because connection fees have gone down. And it's very difficult to budget and maintain anything when you don't have a steady flow of revenue, which is what production fees would give us. Thank you.
I would say one other thing as well, and that is looking at the overall budget of the groundwater district. And I've taken the time to look at it. You know, we want that, as far as I'm concerned, I support the funding mechanism because I want real science here, and I want not only monitoring, but a way to really effectively use the data that we get, right? Data is no good if it's in a book on a table and it's not implemented in some way. And if you look at the funding, unfortunately, some of those biggest players that we're talking about, the quickest way to get rid of the groundwater district and their ability to regulate is to litigate the debt. And whenever they've been hit with the fines that they've been hit with, then those big players have chosen to take them to court. And so the money from those connection fees, that's where the money goes. It doesn't go for the science. It doesn't go for the monitoring. It has to go to litigation to protect those other thousands of property owners out there that they can't stand up and say that. Now, you know, one of these players has filed a federal lawsuit against the groundwater district. That federal lawsuit could take the entire budget of the groundwater district overnight. And I don't say that lightly. And it's the way of the world that litigation happens like that. There is one other piece of legislation that I want to mention as well, and that's HB 2812 that was introduced by Representative Isaac. I see former Representative Isaac here. And it would completely exempt public water systems from any groundwater district regulation. It would remove all caps. And like I said, from the GPS data that I've seen with the state, I could identify about 140 of those. And what you don't realize when we say those public water systems, it's how many of y'all are familiar with the corner of I don't know, like Nutty Brown Road in 2018? That there's that gas station there, right? Guess what? That's a public water system. You know, and you don't necessarily think of it about that. All of our breweries and distilleries, those, if they have bathroom or restroom facilities that do dishwashing, they have to go to the state and they get a permit from the TCEQ declaring themselves a public water system. So I can tell you that it's not just those big systems that we're talking about, but literally dozens of systems which would be uncapped and unfettered there. It's a problem. It still hasn't been heard. I don't think it'll, and at this point, it won't be heard before the end of the session. Be remiss if I didn't bring it. And I will tell you that I know that Commissioner Hammer and myself made some pretty strong public statements regarding it, and I feel very strongly about it. One of the biggest accomplishments, and I compliment, I have to compliment Representative Isaac on the work he did with trying to bring a solution, working with Commissioner Connolly and others on the aqua purification with or electro purification is trying to come in here. And I was a resident here at that time, and I remember that session, and it was tough. I know it was very tough lift. I think what scares me is if that bill were to move forward and future legislative session were to be considered. If that had been in place at the time of electric purification, they would go to the state. It costs about $250,000 to get one of those permits through TCEQ. They pay the $250,000. Those permits are there's a mandate of approval on those permits in general. And so if you meet the guidelines under state law, you get the permit. And it certifies you as a public water system. And so if that law had been in place at the time, they would have paid their $250,000 and gone to the state, and the groundwater district would have been unable, any groundwater district would have been unable to regulate. And that's what scares me. I think there's often unintended consequences to legislation. And I want to get the benefit of the doubt and assume that that's the case, but I'm glad it didn't.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
One small comment.
Of course.
Senate Bill 2660 is a remedy for the woes and issues with the groundwater conservation district, but it's part of a bigger water infrastructure bill that Texas is embarking on. As a state, we have a problem with water supply. And we're inching out in conservation, and we have parity with use and water supply now, so we're struggling. And so it's a bigger picture as well. I remember in 1968, the Texas Water Development Board came out with the first Texas water plan, which is now updated every 5 years. 1968. Well, that was at the end of the 62 to 67 drought. So it was driven by the drought. And there was some vast plans. We're going to get water from Mississippi River and all this kind of stuff. Never happened. But so our water planning is ongoing, and our little county is one of the fastest growing counties in the state, if not the nation. So we have to be cautious and careful. And I like Chris's point of view that landowners should step forward and express themselves. And we're all in this together. And I hope we survive longer than the 10 years that Linda Kaye mentioned, but I'm not sure.
Okay, let's have some questions. Come up here. And if you want to direct it to someone in particular.
Just thank each one of you for your wisdom, your expertise, your commitment, your tireless energy. I have called the Natural Resources Committee on several occasions, individually and as a whole. I've called our state representative, our state senator, and Charles Perry. What language should we be using now in our call? I'm trying to keep it clean, no four-letter words. What should we say to really, I mean, I can't think of words strong enough to impress upon me, so help me.
I think just the taking the time and reaching out to your representatives, I can tell you that there's a lot of them here in this room in different capacity. It means a lot to us individually. And I know it does to our state reps and our state senator. I would say, number one, you're supportive of the bill. Number two, you're a constituent, tell them where you live. Number three, ask them to put the connection fee back in the fee for connection back in the bill and amend it on the floor if possible. And just to be supportive, because I can tell you the average citizen in Hays County, once they know what's actually in the bill and what it does, their first question is why are there 4 operating groundwater districts in the county, and we're the only one who doesn't have the same protections as the other 3. I've got multiple ones in my precinct, and I can't explain that. There's no good reason, and so let's unify what those look like, and let's ensure that and ask them to unify the Hays County.
Thank you.
Once again, I appreciate all that you're talking about doing the future plans. All of us here probably are people who conserve water, and I think that's important. One of the things that I've looked into that is a little bit of an addition. 25% of the water is used by folks like us, 25% is used by the electrical company. It takes 40 gallons of water to produce a kilowatt hour of power. if you're in the best conditions, if you're in a cold generated plant, it's 90 gallons of water. In Wimberley, it's about 1,000 to 1,200 kilowatt hours per month. You do the multiplication, you got 40,000 gallons of water or more that you're using when you turn on the light switch. So something we can do today, in addition to the showers and the toilets and all that, conserve your electricity. It's a super way to save water. We can do it today.
Thank you all for coming out and speaking today. I just wanted to ask, I've heard a lot from you about landowners and individuals in the community getting more involved in the conversation. And I know part of that is contacting your representatives. Are there other ways that individuals can get involved in that conversation? And are there ways that are more effective or more preferable?
I'm gonna answer this as a landowner. Most landowners are invisible. They're not present. They don't understand. I was told they're not necessarily in social media, but when they become aware, they need to call their groundwater districts. They need to write to groundwater districts. They need to ask how their land is figured in their map. They need to understand. The science may be great, but if the math's not applied, they need to understand the map. That's the tough one. mytexaswell.com is going to try to explain that, because I think everybody's good-hearted in the districts. They all wanted to explain it, but I'm telling you, it'll give you a headache. Gives you a headache. So we're going to try it.
Would you say that website again?
mytexaswell.com.
I would also say, you know, there's opportunities at every level of government to participate. And making sure that, and I would advocate for this on any issue, much less water, especially water, but putting together a coalition here locally that looks at specifically, you know, I'll use the Driftwood Valley as an example. If I do anything, I know if Commissioner Hammer, former Commissioner Connolly, if we do anything in Driftwood, the first call I make is to the Driftwood Historical Conservation Society, because those are property owners and residents there who care about that area, and they have the needs and the wishes and values of that area at heart. I think something relative to that, to water, could be countywide, not just with this groundwater district, is a good way to start. And I would advocate that for any issue area, but this one especially is important.
I'm gonna pass for the moment. I was gonna say something, but it can wait.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for hosting this, and thank you all. I mean, the amount of support that we have for water in this community, it just shows us that it's top of mind. My name is Morgan Harrop, by the way. I'm your Precinct 3 County Commissioner, if you're in Precinct 3. So I just wanted to say thank you all so much for putting this on. Thank you so much for being here and answering these questions. As I've been in office for about 4 months, I will tell you, I was ignorant on our water issue until now. It is the most complex issue that we have, and it deserves all of our attention. It's a nonpartisan issue. All sides should be in support of our water, period, end of story. And I will tell you, when I'm in, by the end of my term or end of my time, I will have moved the water positive, or moved the needle positively for our water. You can hold me to that, I promise that. But I did want to ask a question, because it is an extremely complex issue, from doing ASR studies to studying the Lower Trinity to just redoing our study from 2011. What would you guys say? I would like just to hear one quick just topic off of your head of what we could do to better our water from a county perspective.
I think there's no doubt that the groundwater availability studies, those need to come to the groundwater district. We're the ones with the science. We're the ones who know where the water is, because it's not the same throughout the district. We're the ones who have that science and can tell you or find out pretty quick, is there really groundwater available there now, as well as 10 years from now or 20 years from now? that's not been happening. I know it's gonna be costly, that there could be a fee to the person request that has to have it done. To help pay for that extra time or whatever. But those groundwater availability studies so far, the county gets so many development requests that literally about all they can do is kind of check the boxes. Because they have a limited time that they have to get those things out there. And that is a constraint that needs to be changed. But that groundwater availability study needs to be done by people who know what the groundwater availability is, and that's the groundwater districts in the county.
I did want to say, I know that me and Walt looked right at each other. We did adopt a resolution for the groundwater availability studies to not do the variances, but we also added into that resolution that they had to go through the Hays-Trinity Groundwater Conservation District too. So I agree with that. Okay.
Well, Morgan, I did some water availability studies. The water code was updated in the late nineties, I think. So the county subdivision regulations require a 2-well water availability study, and I did those in Gillespie, Blanco, and Hays County for a couple of years. And I recall that the county, you know, they had a county engineer, maybe Rose, so he was the person that reviewed those. So I hope you get somebody on the commissioner, in the commissioner's court and staff that can do an adequate job. And yes, I remember taking my report to the county with my PE license on there, and it was approved and all that. Then I said, well, why don't you send that to the Groundwater Conservation District? And they, oh, that would be a good idea. Because they need the 2 measures of aquifer performance, transmissivity and storativity, that allows them to do the better job with groundwater modeling, groundwater allocation. So I look forward to the new rules. I hope that, you know, we'd be glad to take a look at it.
One thing that I would say, it's part of that conservation development title, is a good example of it. Up until several years ago, the county didn't do development agreements. We never really had what we thought was adequate authority to do that. But since I've been in office, any condo regime, and that's warehouses, whenever I say condo regime, people think of apartments. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about any condo regime, anything like that. Now we require a development agreement. And that development agreement is just a contract between the county and that developer that says, here are what our expectations of, and here's what our rules say, and here's how you're gonna follow. Now, when it comes to play is those developers, I would tell you almost every single development that comes in wants a variance of some rule of some type. And whenever I say that, a lot of those rules, this is my personal view, a lot of the rules from development regs, some of them don't make sense, but some of them do, and some of them are needed. But whenever they ask for those variances, then that gives us the ability to say, you know what, we'll consider that. But here's what you're gonna do for us. And when we've done that with some of those developments, we've been able to negotiate, you know, a lot size variance and say, we'll accept your lot size variance, but you have to cap all your roots. And you have to use nothing but surface water. One of the things that we have the ability to do on plats, when plats a piece of property, we can place in there platting restrictions that they must use surface water, that they can't use groundwater, things like that. And so I would say us being more inventive under the rules that we have, I don't have even a dream that that rule of capture is going to change in the state of Texas. I'm just telling you. That's a mountain that no one will climb, and it's going to be tough. But we can be inventive in a way that we implement the rules and the authority that we do have to try to skin that cat in a different way. And so that's what we try to do at the county, and I think that we're going to continue to try to do that.
So I'd like to ask the commissioner, I don't know the answer to this, but if you have control over septic installation and inspection, could you require systems that are closed systems that treat and reuse the effluent for the septic? That's a 22% usage of water right there.
No, the answer is no. We don't have the ability to require that. We do have, some of the, what I would say is that we do have, there was a study done last year by the Edwards Aquifer Alliance of all the counties over the Edwards, and which had the most stringent regulations when it came to the aquifer, and Hays County was the most. And one of the reasons for that is because we have a very low, we require that you have to have no more than 300 gallons a day septic per acre. And that's very low. I mean, if you had gotten a septic system in Hays County in the 80s, that probably would have been 900. So there's been changes, systematic changes within the county over decades to try to address those issues and try to make that, it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard. If you want a well and septic in Hays County on the same property, we have about, it's more or less a 6 acre minimum for that, if you're not existing already. So.
Good evening. Thank you guys for being here. I know the focus here tonight is on the water that's under our feet, but I'm just curious to know if anybody is looking into desalinization as a possible source for additional water for the state.
Yeah, there's actually Senator Perry has a bill, same senator that introduced 2660, and there's a parts per million requirement of, I think, 3,000, something like that. It's non-usable water, and it's incentivizing additional research and desal. But you're seeing communities all over the state right now. I mean, El Paso's been using desal for probably 30 years. And actually the plant that they put in, I was working on the appropriations committee in DC, and we funded that plant on a military base. But you see desal all up and down the coast of the US that has its own problems. Some real problems with it, with the operation of those facilities. But you're seeing communities all over the state who are looking at it because now water is such a problem. And what I think is going to be interesting is while we talked about these bills tonight, you know, we're probably looking at the state will probably have the largest influx of money to do additional infrastructure related to water. Texas, and I say this publicly and people think I'm crazy when I say this, Texas is not out of water. It's just in the wrong place. And there are places all over East Texas who would love to get rid of their water. And how do you do that? And I say that not jokingly, there's real issues with freshwater intrusion into the Gulf from Sabine and places like that, where they're losing coastline every day and they're losing some of the wildlife habitat. They would love to be able to divert that water and send it to places like Hays County if they had the ability. The other thing is that there are some really ingenuitive folks out there looking at stormwater capture and runoff. You know, when we have those hurricanes and when we have that major flooding in East Texas, there are literally millions and millions of acre feet that aren't really usable because it's dirty. It's dirty. And there's technologies out there that people all over East Texas are looking at to try to clean that water and put it back into a potable water system and how they can do that.
Just an FYI, the salinity level in Hays County is pretty minimal, so desal is not gonna be an answer for Hays County.
There is another technology that's being used, it's called AWG. I don't think it's that far off. I think David Baker, he's in the room still. I think he's invested in AWG, atmospheric water generation. It's a good choice. It works, and it's going to even be better going forward, with just a fact to keep in your mind. As the planet gets warmer, whether you believe in that or not, every degree it gets warmer, 7% more water can be stored in the atmosphere. So if you had a long-term vision, you would probably see AWG, atmospheric water generation, as part of it. And by the way, this is my lovely wife for 50 years that's going to answer the question.
Chris, you mentioned a landowner, say with 10 acres, 15 acres, gets 200 to 500 gallons a day is allotted by this district?
So she's been traveling with me on this journey for 5 years. And we go back and forth over these facts. The state of Texas allows us private exempt well owners, and remember, there's thousands of us here. 25,000 to 10,000 gallons a day, as long as we don't waste it. Now, nobody in their mind uses that. Well, maybe some people, but I don't know, maybe. So keep that in fact, but the groundwater districts allot for a private exempt well 200 to 500 gallons a day. So even though my land is collecting water, even though that water, my land is filtering that water, recharging it, I'm still only allotted in the map 200 to 500 gallons a day, even though my well can pump 25,000 gallons.
Okay, I have to speak up here. That allotment is not an allotment. It's the amount that we figure is being used when we look at how much is being pumped from the aquifer. It's 30 gallons a day per person per household that's how we figure it. So you have the right to pump 25,000 gallons a day from your private well. But when we start looking at how much of the aquifer is being used of our MAG, our modeled available groundwater, we account for everybody's private wells, and that's the number we figure of the probable use. It's what most people use, unless you're the person that has the ski lake, the 2-acre ski lake out on the flat acre or wherever it is. But it's not an allotment. We have no jurisdiction whatsoever over private wells. It's just the number we use to figure how much water is being pumped from the aquifer by private wells.
I would absolutely agree with that, except when you do the math. And I do this with all respect, when you do the math and you allot a private exempt well owner 200 to 500 gallons a day, you end up with surplus water that looks like it's available when really that well owner could and should be, under other groundwater districts, given more rights to claim more potential water in the math.
Okay, so again, let me clarify. We may figure that it's 200 to 500, but you still have the right to pump 25,000 gallons. Okay, we have no jurisdiction. That is only an accounting number when we start figuring how much, and there is at least 5,000 private wells that we account used per day that's figured into that 9,100 acre feet that we have. So it's just a number, it's not an allotment, it's just what we look at the use, potential use, probable use. Those 5,000 wells, there may be 35 of them only, 3,500 only that are operational. The others may be plugged, old, falling in, whatever. But we think there's probably more like 8,000 wells, but we work with 5,000. So please understand the Chapter 36 State Water Code gives private well owners full rule of capture as long as you do no harm to your neighbors. And the groundwater districts, none in the state have any authority over private wells, none.
You're both right, in a way, but I understand that the 25,000 gallons a day, which is 17 gallons or so, per minute, is built into the drilling permit by the state. So my well just cannot pump more than 17 gallons a minute. It's constrained to that 25,000 gallons. His point of view is, as a landowner, why shouldn't we reap the benefit of the recharge on our own land, which figures out to be about 104 gallons per acre per day. And so there's a certain amount of truth in it. There needs to be more groundwater equity.
Okay, just one more thing. Let me just clarify why this one is up, that there's gotta be a good understanding. There may not be that 25,000 gallons a day in that aquifer under that land.
Thank you.
So we are basing our number on the science that we have and what we know is in the various areas using a general factor to come up with that figure. I can promise you, nobody around here has 25,000 gallons to pump a day from their wells. It ain't possible. It ain't there.
Thank you.
So most of this discussion has been about pumping the water out of the ground. But these people wouldn't be pumping, these big companies would be pumping all this water, leaks notwithstanding, if people weren't using the water and wasting a bunch of it probably as well. So what I'd like to know is where are the efforts, or what are the efforts on that side of it to promote good water conservation and to promote a culture in our area of not flushing the toilet every time you go, or whatever you got, not watering, you're having a lawn you have to water all the time. I don't see any discussion on that side of it.
Okay, so when someone gets a permit, they have to file a water conservation plan or curtailment. And that's these 10, 20, 30, 40% curtailments that have to be done when we get into certain aquifer conditions. They are required to decrease their pumping that amount. It is their responsibility to let their users know that that's what's happening. And what we have seen is that one company in particular has not notified their customers that there is this conservation effort that they are supposed to be doing. The city of Wood Creek called me for signs to put out in the city so their people would know.
We should leave it up to the companies.
Well, the companies are required by law to do it, and they're just some of them. Wimberley water supply is fabulous. I'm just gonna tell you, if everybody followed the procedures, that I have walked into their office and heard them calling people and saying, we're noticing that you're using a lot more water. You better check for a leak. Do you need some help? Other water companies are not doing that, but it is their responsibility to do those curtailments. And when they do not, there is a penalty attached to that. And that's what we're looking at, is not just over pumping the total permit, but over pumping at times of curtailments. But it is the responsibility of the public water supply company to notify their customers that this restraint of use is in effect. Here's what you gotta do. Here's what you're not supposed to do. And that has not been happening.
One of the other things that I would say is that there have been some positive policy changes over the last number of years. Back in 2011, the whole code related to housing, HOA law, those kind of things were changed in Texas. And one of the things that's in there is raise your hand if you were in an HOA that requires you to water your lawn or to have green lawn. Anybody? Well, those exist. And I don't like to see them. But one of the things is that, like, for example, the neighborhood that I moved into, they had there was xeriscaping was specifically prohibited. And so under state law now, HOAs cannot do that. You have to be allowed to xeriscape your lawn if you want to, right? That's a good change in state law. What some of our municipalities are looking at is looking at requiring all irrigation that they have to use reuse water of some type, if they do any irrigation. They're looking at changing their ordinances relative to how lawns are watered, what landscaping can be used, not only incentivizing, but in certain cases, mandating the use of native plants and some of those things that don't use the water that you would otherwise. You can live in East Texas and have St. Augustine. You can't do that in the Hill Country, not in a sustainable way anywhere. But 20 years ago, everybody had St. Augustine lawn. And so there are things that we can do at a local level or at a state level that there have been positive changes. And I think, as long as the county can't mandate those things, but individual cities within the county can, and they've been doing it.
With apologies to my couple of friends who are waiting to ask questions. I know. But a couple of folks have recognized former Representative Jason Isaac, who is here this evening, and he has asked for a couple minutes to represent his wife, Representative Kaye Isaac, and give you a report.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm one of the worst interns in her office. My name is Jason Isaac. I served this district or this area for 4 terms last decade. And now my wife, Representative Kaye Isaac, serves this area as well as Comal County. But I want to give you a little bit of good news. I want to give you some good news because there are some incremental steps that are being done to protect our groundwater. House Bill 29. These will either already passed or they will pass before the end of the session. House Bill 29 requires utilities to do water audits and report to the Texas Water Development Board any of their losses. It's estimated that the city of Austin loses 48% of their water to leakage. 48%. Aqua Texas, it's my understanding, is somewhere over 30%. They're going to have to do an audit and report this to the Water Development Board because knowledge is power, and it would be nice to have this information about water losses. We should be using that water or conserving that water, but we need to know if there's particular losses that are happening and where they're happening. Commissioner Smith mentioned HOAs. House Bill 517 will strip away the power from HOAs to mandate that you water your lawns. This is a huge victory because this is where most of the water use goes, is people watering their lawns. And so now HOAs, cities already have this authority where they can say you cannot water your lawn during a certain stage of drought. Now HOAs will not be able to mandate that you water your lawn. And I think there's a provision in there that says like after the drought is over, you have something like 60 days to get your lawn back to, a pretty state that complies with their standards. But taking that power away from HOAs, I think, is a big win when it comes to conservation. HB 5560. If you go and look up that bill, you'll see the author, you'll see a co-author. It's Representative Isaac. There's only one co-author to that bill. It's Representative Isaac. It implements penalties for overuse of groundwater. That bill has passed the House. It's in the Senate right now. It should pass the Senate any day and go to the governor's desk. Implement penalties for overuse of groundwater. House Bill 2015 mandates the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They have the authority to issue and create municipal utility districts, something the legislature also has the authority to do. TCEQ will have to consider water conservation when creating a municipal utility district in the Hill Country Priority Groundwater Management Area. This is new authority that TCEQ has never had before. They essentially have to rubber stamp MUDs at TCEQ. Something that when I was in the legislature, that the Hill Country representatives around me started doing was, if you wanted a municipal utility district, my thought was that's your private property right. You can either do it through me or TCEQ, and I'd rather you do it through me. And most of the time at the end of session, when the bills would pass, they found out why they really didn't want to do it through me. Because if they were going to develop, I took away their right to use their groundwater to do development. This is something that we did with the Needmore Ranch MUD in 2013. I stuck a provision in the last minute on this bill. Never been more scared. If you don't know the owner of the Needmore Ranch, he's a pretty big dude. He does not have low T. Told me that he got, 4-letter words as I walked out of the House floor and towered. I made a promise to the people that I serve that I would protect the groundwater. So he lost his rights to utilize his groundwater. Now, the next session, when we put that particular area in the Barton Springs Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, he can only use it for agricultural use on his land. He can't sell it to electropurification, which was the big battle you heard about in 2015. There's also a constitutional amendment that you should have the opportunity to vote on this November. It's something that I tried to do when I was in office and couldn't get done. It got done this session. That you'll have the opportunity to vote on exempting from property tax valuation the valuation of rainwater collection. Right now, if you add rainwater collection, I've looked at prices, it's $20,000 to $25,000 to do it for a small, less than 2,000 square foot home. That increases the valuation of your property by $20,000 to $25,000, and you pay additional property taxes on that. That constitutional amendment passes this November, then you'll be able to exempt the valuation of your rainwater collection. Those are already exempt from sales tax. So you can buy the components to do that. You don't have to pay sales tax on rainwater collection. So this will be on the Constitution this November. Now, there's been two specific pieces of policy that have been talked about tonight that I want to address in a little bit more detail. The first one, I think, was 2812 or 2612, the House bill that Representative Isaac filed to exempt water supply corporations from management from the Hays-Trinity Groundwater Conservation District. You want to know why that bill didn't go anywhere? A hearing was never requested. And that's the first step you have to do when you have a bill, you file a bill and you request a hearing. If you don't request a hearing, the bill never gets heard. It never gets through that first process of how you become a bill. It was an obvious conversation starter, and believe me, it started some conversations. Now, on Senate Bill 2660, that's by a senator that's 500 miles away from here in Lubbock, not from your local senator, not from your local representative, gives immense power to a groundwater district and repeals protections that have been in place since it was created. Now, my wife, if you ask her what's her #1 priority, she will tell you property taxes. Property taxes. For 8 years, I heard it, for 4 terms. What are you doing to reduce the burden of property taxes on the people you serve? And then she gets elected. Now I get to ask that question. That's her #1 issue, is property taxes. And when you repeal the section of code that gives a district full chapter 36, they get the ability to levy a property tax with a voter confirmation election. One of the other repealers repeals the November election date for that district and sets it whenever in a May general election, a low turnout election. This is exactly what's in the committee substitute that was heard this morning. I have a draft of it. I have reviewed it. It has been in there from the originally being filed. It grants vast rulemaking authority. But the ability to do a property tax is something that my wife will not stand for. Creating a new property tax. When I was in the legislature, we had an agreement on production fees. The district opposed those production fees. Full repeal.
No, look, 2660. And I'm gonna ask you something.
You guys are lying. There's a repealer to give you full chapter. Everyone has said it. It gives full chapter 36 authority. Mandatory metering on private wells. Mandatory metering on private wells is in Senate Bill 2660. There are 5 repealers in there. Please go into the bill. Look them up. Me too.
Representative, I think I do have one question for you.
Yes.
And this is a very direct question. And it's a two-parter. You know, the Dripping Springs Water Supply Corp is one of the biggest users that we have in this army. If you go to their website today, on the front page of their website is a political ad for the bill that would remove them from all regulation. It's obvious that that's the case. One of the things that is concerning to me more than anything, and I did not want to go here. I've had a friend for a long time. I consider him a very good friend. He was one of your staffers. He is the current chief of staff. And for Representative Isaac, in between the time he worked for you and now works as chief of staff for Representative Isaac, I think most of the people here in the room know that he was the director of business development for Aquifer. And I don't begrudge anybody having a job, feeding their family and making sure their kids have a roof over their head. But to say that bill was just a conversation starter, you have a full board of elected officials on a water system in Dripping Springs that have gone to the mat saying that this was dropped on their behalf, and it's a good piece of legislation. I don't think anybody other than Aqua Texas and those specific major violators think it's a good piece of legislation. He's a good person. I truly believe that at a base level, that as a Representative Isaac wants to do the right thing. I think that was the absolute wrong way to go about it. And I can tell you that the piece of legislation that I testified on today throwing a red herring out that it's gonna create a property tax is just a red herring.
With a confirmation election, that's what chapter 36 authority gives you, with a provision to not allow an election is not stricken from the committee substitute.
It's not true.
That is not true.
Well, as long as we're talking about conflicts, because you besmirched a former staffer of mine. Okay, I got it. You know, when I worked on the Need More Mud, I said that they have to bring in surface water. Gary's on the House floor. Why don't you go to house.texas.gov and look at the debates going on in the House floor right now? I appreciate it very much. Thank you. But we're very concerned in the valley here about high density development, about thousands of rooftops. This is what I've heard. When you look at the expansion plan for the West Travis County Public Utility Authority, they want to serve 30,000 new homes just north of Wimberley, massively expand their footprint. Guess who's on the board? Along with Scott Roberts, another massive developer who I took his groundwater rights away from him for his development. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And founded, let's talk about West Travis County P-Way for a second. They're the sole surface water provider in North Hays County. We've actually done water agreements over the last 4 months that specifically prohibit the use of groundwater and mandate that they have to bring in surface water. Now, I don't know about you, but if there's the option as a county official that we can't deny development because these developers are moving out of individual jurisdictions and choosing to do so in the county because they know that we don't have any authority to stop them. If my only option is to get them surface water or allow them to use groundwater, I'm going to build the biggest pipeline I can to North Hays County to ensure that, guess what? They get surface water and it won't be coming from here. It won't be coming from the ground under our feet. Now, Wimberley has a very different view on those rooftops and that water. There's a reason that the P-Way doesn't serve Wimberley, Texas. I'll tell you right now, I don't want to get shot putting a water line into Wimberley, Texas, because I would. And I'd probably, if somebody else did it, I'd probably stand behind them and watch them use the gun. But there's a reason for that. Even to the west of 12 in the north part of the county, the West Travis County P-Way mandated that a new development that wanted water service there had to stop using all their wells except for some agricultural use. And they made them build the line out to them. And when they built the line, they downsized the line to ensure that there could be no more connections on that line, that there would not be any growth out there. And so I think that at every level, and again, the two people who are on the board of West Travis County P-Way from Hays County, one is myself and one is Scott Roberts, who was on that board since its inception. And so I would say that property taxes are red herring.
I helped create that P-Way as a county commissioner in Hays County. And that water system that is in our community and in this county was about to be sold to a foreign investor. How responsible do you think those people would have been in managing water systems in the unincorporated area of Hays County and western Hays County? They wouldn't. And so we partnered with other jurisdictions in the area, created a local entity in which Commissioner Smith was just talking about, Representative Isaac addressed, in order to keep that system under local control. So that's how it originated. It was divesting and retail water systems and had it on the open market. So that was the condition in which that even took place in the first place.
The other thing that I would say is that, there are water systems on the north side of our county, and Radiance is a great example. It's just off 2018. Their entire well system, it went up belly up about 6 months ago. And that well system, if it wasn't for the P-Way, right now we're in talks with them to try to connect that entire system. We've got 41 homes in there that have been hauling water for the last 6 months. The P-Way is expanding their system in ways specifically to try to address that and take people off well. At the end of the day, they are going to be in a situation, hopefully, to provide the water that's needed, not only for development, that's one thing, but to try to get a number of these developments that are long established. I'll use an example of Harrison Hills on the west side of Dripping Springs.
I've got two developments over there that whenever they started, they had a community well system, right? One well for 20 houses. And whenever you signed your deed, you paid $15 a month to a well, to the community well service. And that was going to pay for that well in perpetuity. Guess what? Back in the 80s, they permitted them as half-acre lots, and their well went out probably about 10 years ago. And so all of those properties, they have to now, the only way they can build on that property is to do 100% rainwater collection and haul water. I think that it's, number one, it's a red herring, but those systems that are out there, the PUA wants to build out a system to provide them enough water where they don't have to use groundwater. And they have the availability to do that now if again, the restrictions that we placed on them is that they have to quit pumping out of the aquifer, and they don't want to do that. Would it cost more to the average ratepayer? Yes, it would. It would, because they would have to buy that water, and they wouldn't have the ability to pump it, as in their terms, pump it out of the ground for free. And you know, I'm a ratepayer on that system. Like I said, I have 2 meters, and I'm more than willing to pay it. I think it's interesting, whenever we passed the resolution in court, the one thing I would say is there was one person who came and spoke against it. And it was the general manager of one of these systems. And when we asked them how much groundwater they use, they said, well, we pump 1 million gallons a day. So at 365 million gallons a year, which we know they pump more than that, but at 365 million gallons a year, just doing some quick math while we were sitting in court, I said, how many connections do you have? Well, we have over 4,700 connections. So 1 million gallons a year, just use the round number, 4,700 connections. You're looking at about $24 a year per connection. And so $2 a month on that system. Now, it could be different on other systems. But as just in general, as a ratepayer, one of the things that I've learned through this process that I had no idea the situation y'all were in at Wood Creek. And Wimberley, I truly, honestly had no idea. And then I started sitting down and talking to people and say, let me see your water bill. $125 before you start.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. And so, yes, there are things that need to be done. I think that the West Travis County PUA has probably stepped up and doing some of the most positive things to prevent additional wells being placed into the aquifer than any entity that's out there. And I'll leave it.
Okay, I have to address a couple of things. First of all, we specifically said no taxation in the bill. Second of all, neither Representative Isaac or anyone from her office has contacted the Groundwater District to have any discussion. Those repealers that are being talked about, first of all, it's not possible to be repealing things in Chapter 36. Those are verifications that we have those rights within Chapter 36. They're not repealers. They're not repealing that. It's giving us further Chapter 36 that all the other 98 groundwater districts in the state have.
Exactly.
So I don't know to call this ignorance or playing with you and trying to fly something over, but that misrepresentation, call it what you will, but the fact is, what is being put out there as the negatives is not true. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd just like to say one thing. Mark Twain in his wisdom saw this coming. Whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting.
Okay, we've got one more question from the audience, unless it's very long.
Commissioner Smith, thank you for your service on West Travis PUA. That is a very responsible PUA that I am very aware it's taking groundwater off the table and putting surface water in those homes. I appreciate that. And thank you and Commissioner Hammer for sticking your necks out. This has not been easy politically for what you guys are doing in support of our area. So I appreciate that. How many of you guys are on Wimberley Water? I'm on Wimberley Water. Church is on Wimberley Water. How many of you know that Wimberley Water supports 2812 and doesn't support 2660? How many of you know that they took out an advertisement in the Wimberley View, spending our money in favor of that? I'm like Linda Kaye, Wimberley Water is It is a great water system. It is run by a great general manager. I love Wimberley Water, but they got this one wrong.
They did.
Some of you have been asking, what can you do? Call Wimberley Water. Let them know you're willing to pay $5 extra a month to support a healthy aquifer district. They need to hear from their members. They're not speaking for their members. I guarantee that. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, in all seriousness, I just want to say thank you for testifying. And for those of you who don't know, he was kind enough to come to the Capitol and testify twice and give actual data, usable data to the committee to make the decision. And that's citizens in action, right? I mean, that's what. We as elected officials can go in front of the legislature, and yes, it makes an impact, but when they hear from the average rank and file citizen, it takes the time. We're very fortunate that we live 30 minutes from the Capitol, 45 minutes from the Capitol, so we can get there easily. You know, I will tell you, it's worth the drive to have an impact.
I'll make just one final comment. We've been trying for years to get a production fee. It got ditched. There was a bill that was pretty useless, that Representative Isaac did. He was gonna give us 7 cents. Yeah, 7 cents. And and so it went through the House and it was into the, Donna Campbell had it. And I called and said, could she do more for us? Now, this is my ignorance. I called about 4 days before it was going to committee. So I didn't know better, but I said, could she do more for us? And I was told, well, I don't think so. I said, well, would you just ask? I'm on my way to the Capitol to speak on behalf of that bill for 7 cents when I am told that the bill has been pulled because I asked it to be pulled. Okay, so I stay away from any Senate things, and have been advised to do so. The real reason it happened is that, and I'm okay with this. This is when EP was going on, and they were up there working like crazy. Commissioner Conley, Representative Isaac, they were all there working real hard to get that EP thing done. That needed to be done, but I think correct information. I have a problem with untruth and misrepresentation. So we were told, when I say we, those of us on the board of directors of the Groundwater District, to stay out of this and to let the lobbyists that we hired at a very hefty price to do this work for us, because we have tried every legislative session for the past 5 that I know of to try to get a production fee and to get some things done. And it has failed. The Meatmore guy, he killed it last time. He had he killed it by himself. You called somebody and had the bill pulled so it could not go forward. So this is a very, very important time for this bill to go through, for it to be clearly understood, for it to be an honest, upfront thing. And I'm on the phone constantly calling, what's happening. And I think it's gonna fly this time. I hope so for all of y'all, all of us, but we can't let the pressure up. Everybody on the Senate, in the House needs to be called. Every representative in the House needs to be called to support this bill, however it comes out. I didn't do it today. I can still say that, but we didn't know how that bill was going to look, and we still don't know exactly how it's gonna get to the floor. And if some of those changes are made that Senator Campbell has asked for, there's going to be problems. Like she wants to reduce the amount of the production fee. We can't make it on that. So just keep at it. Don't stop. Call, email, and let that committee know. And the bill as it came out of the Senate. Would that be the correct term? As it came out of the Senate, or did those changes get made?
No, the bill originally introduced.
The bill as it was introduced.
As it passed out.
As it passed out of committee, that would be it. So anyway, thank you guys. I think it's just important to
have the truth. The truth sometimes hurts. But that's what we have to work with is the truth and transparency. And I think that's extremely important. When I hear someone representing me doing that, I have to speak out. And I don't like to be political. I don't care who you are. Be honest.
So, thank you all for coming. We've lost about half. We called this to be end at 8 o'clock. We did that at 10. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you all so much.